All right, welcome. Welcome those who are coming in through Zoom. We want to say hello. Welcome to our Facebook family as well as you are coming in. Okay, so we want to thank you for joining us this afternoon for a much needed virtual forum entitled Enough is Enough, Waking Up to COVID-19 and State-Sanctioned Violence. We're honored to have an amazing panel here with us this afternoon that's going to be part of a dynamic discussion. I'm honored on behalf of Healthy Black Family. I'm the executive director and honored to be part of this and welcoming all of you. We know that there are many factors that are disproportionately impacting particularly Black families at this time as it relates to this global pandemic and systemic structural racism in the form of state-sanctioned violence and many other forms. We know our families are constantly being assaulted and insulted in many ways. And so this time is really critical for us to come together and discuss the various topics that impact our families, particularly as we think about how we protect, inform, empower our families and our youth. We are welcome those who are coming in through Facebook and Zoom, welcome. And we also want to acknowledge the various organizations represented here that are lending their voice for this discussion this afternoon, such as the Pillars of the Community in San Diego, the Community Movement Builders in Detroit, the East Bay Community Law Center, the American Civil Liberties Union in Northern California, Village Connect, and the African American Holistic Resource Center in Berkeley, and many others that have supported this effort. And so we pretty much are here today from a discussion from our founder, Dr. Vicki Alexander, as well as Joyce Lewis, our board, to really think about ways that we can create a safe space and a space for us to come together to think, to strategize, and to collaborate. So thank you for those who are on through Zoom and Facebook. Also want to thank Akila, office manager, supporting technical assistance and provide a lot of the logistics for today. So thank you Joyce for all that you've done, and Dr. Vicki as well. So I'm going to turn over the mic to our moderator for the afternoon, who will be guiding us through our discussion. She's a longtime supporter and advocate of Healthy Black Families, as well as a member of our board of directors. So I pass it on to you, Joyce Lewis. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joyce Lewis, and I'll be your moderator for today. Welcome again to our forum, Enough is Enough. This community forum is a perfect example of how Black people can organize, share information, and improve Black life. Before we turn to the order of business, I just want to share some encouraging words from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said this: "Progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability." So I want to encourage you, let's encourage one another as we remain in the struggle for progress. It's our life's work. Thank you for remaining awake and vigilant through this great revolution. Today, we have 3 goals we hope to achieve from this forum. We want to share community resource information, encourage dialogue and connectivity, and light a spark for you to take this knowledge back to your families and communities to implement change. Today, we have some awesome speakers who will present each approximately 5 minutes on one of 4 different panels. Most are live. I think we have one that's pre-recorded. We'll take a short break after panel 3, and we'll host a Q&A and comments following panel 4. We acknowledge that this is very heavy work, emotionally and spiritually. So if you need to stretch, deep breathe, get yourself some water, Please take care of yourselves and then return after a refresh. Our first panel is entitled On the Front Lines Against COVID-19 and Racism. And we have two speakers on this panel. Our first speaker is Dr. Zia Malala, a pediatrician and public health professional committed to improving health outcomes for children. Dr. Malala believes that social justice advocacy is essential for promoting health in Black communities. Currently, she works at Mission Neighborhood Health Center in San Francisco. She leads the San Francisco Department's Collective Impact Initiative to reduce racial disparities in birth outcomes, and she leads the health department's response to COVID-19. I now turn it over to Dr. Malala.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And thank you so much to my Healthy Black family who has convened together today so that we can figure out how we can support one another in our pursuit of justice. So thank you so much for inviting me. I think that I'm going to share my screen. And what I want to start with is I want to actually start with a story. This story is not my story. It's a story from one of my idols, Dr. Kaamika Jones, who I'm hoping when I grow up, I hope I can be her, but so far that's not happening. Anyways, this is a story called The Gardener's Tale. And this story is the story of a gardener who moved into a new house. And when she moved into the new house, there were two planter beds in front of the house. One of the planter beds had soil in it, but the soil was hard and old and rocky. The other planter was empty. The gardener loved flowers, and so she decided that she was going to go to the hardware store so that she could fill these new planter beds with flowers. She got to the hardware store, she got a new bag of soil for the empty planter bed, and then she also went to get some seeds. Now this gardener, she loved red flowers, and so she immediately went to grab 2 packets of red seeds, but when she got there was only 1 packet left. So she got 1 packet of red seeds, and then she was disappointed, but she got the other packet of purple seeds. She brought this all home. She filled the empty container with the new, rich, fertile soil, and she planted the red seeds into that good, healthy soil. And then she turned to the other planter filled with the old, hard, rocky soil, and she decided since she didn't care that much about the purple flowers, she was going to put the purple flowers in the rocky soil. After a few months, of course, the flowers sprouted, and when they grew, this is what she found. She found that the red flowers had grown up to become healthy and strong and robust, and the purple flowers were kind of stunted and only grew to a middling height. After a few months, those flowers went to seed, and when the next flower sprouted up, the same thing happened. The red flowers were strong and robust, the purple flowers were middling and stunted. This happened generation after generation, and after a while, the gardener said to herself, well, of course I'm correct to prefer red flowers over purple flowers, because look at these red flowers, they're so beautiful and strong, and look at these purple flowers, they're so disappointing. So of course, this story is an allegory for how often the Black community is seen. People want to look at us, look at our health outcomes, look at our poverty, and they want to say, look at these Black people. I mean, of course we shouldn't be investing in them because they have had 400 years in this country and they can't make anything with these opportunities. But what I want to remind everybody on this call is that there's nothing wrong with us. What is wrong with us is the soil in which we are trying to grow and thrive. And so we as advocates have to keep our eyes on the soil. And what is the soil? The soil is racism. And so when we're looking at racism, it's important that we understand how it's impacting us. When we are accused of having these higher rates of obesity, higher rates of illness, higher rates of COVID, it's important that we understand racism is at the root of this. When we are seeing these statistics about Black students being some of the lowest achieving students in our elementary and high schools, it's important that we recognize how racist the school system is and the education that they are that they're centering white people in the education, and that is what students of color are supposed to thrive in. When we look at issues of police brutality, it's apparent that this is not an issue of a few bad apples, but rather a systemic issue of racism within the police department. And of course, not just the police department, but hospitals, schools, businesses, etc. And so when we look at underemployment and high rates of unemployment in the Black community, it's important to recognize that it's not that we are not wonderful workers that bring so much to the workplaces, but rather that we have a very racist system that doesn't even allow us to engage meaningfully in the economy. And lastly, or second to last, we need to of course mention gentrification, displacement, Black poverty, and mass incarceration. Racism is at the root of all of these issues. And so it's important, healthy Black families, when we think about what kind of gardeners do we want to be, we need to think about cultivating justice from the soil up. We do not need programs that are meant to change Black people, make us more like adherent to white supremacy. What we need are policy changes, changes in funding, voting opportunities, and voting empowerment so that we can cultivate the sort of soil we need in order to be successful now and in the future. So thank you so much, Healthy Black Family, for joining me in the struggle for justice, and I cannot wait to see what we create together.
Dr. Malala, for presenting the gardener's tale and making it plain through the diagrams. We obviously have a lot of work to do. And I mean, we're great seeds. Our progeny are great seeds. We just need the right environment, and we're here to create that. So our next speaker is Dr. Amani Allen. And Dr. Allen is the Executive Associate Dean and Associate Professor at University of California, Berkeley, Division of Community Health Sciences and Epidemiology. Dr. Allen's research focuses on race and socioeconomic health disparities and the measurement of racism as a social determinant of health. Dr. Allen has trained thousands of public health professionals to understand how racism in all its forms impacts the health of Black people in this country. I believe Dr. Allen's presentation is pre-recorded, and Akila will switch to Dr. Allen's presentation now.
Thank you, Joyce. Give me 1 second, and I'm going to screen share. And we will be all good. All right, can you guys confirm that you see Dr. Amani Allen, or is it still the emblem?
We see Dr. Allen on the screen now.
Beautiful, here we go.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Amani Allen, and I'm sorry I can't be there with you in real time, but appreciate having this opportunity to share a few thoughts on the topic of violence against the Black community. In public health, we talk a lot about fundamental or root causes. We also talk a lot about race as a social determinant of health, and have for a long time. But I would argue that when we're talking about fundamental or root causes, that it's not race that's the fundamental or root cause, but it's racism. In Ta-Nehisi Coates' recent book, Between the World and Me, he says that race is the child of racism, not the father. And naming groups has never been a matter of genealogy or physiognomy, but of hierarchy. And so the argument here is that it's because of racism in this country and the desire to oppress certain groups of people, to shunt resources away from certain groups and towards other groups, that we have this kind of disproportionate impact of resources and goods, many of which are health promoting goods and resources. We can talk about disparities in income, disparities, and I really should be saying inequities, because disparity just means difference. And what we're talking about are not just simple random differences. We're talking about intentional, systematic inequities and the distribution of underlying health promoting resources such as income, education, employment, wage and labor, job opportunities, neighborhoods, what kinds of resources are available to Black and brown communities in their neighborhoods, such as fresh fruits and vegetables, as opposed to a disproportionately high number of off-premise liquor establishments, which is just a fancy way of saying liquor stores. So, I mean, we could go on and really talking about the various ways in which racism has manifested to decrease the life chances and opportunity structures of Black communities. For a long time, we have known and we have seen the evidence that African Americans and Blacks more broadly share a disproportionate burden of poor health outcomes. When we think about chronic disease, such as hypertension, which is the leading cause of death, the leading cause of cardiovascular disease, which is a leading cause of death, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, chronic respiratory illness. When we think about maternal and child health outcomes like infant mortality, low birth weight, preterm delivery, when we think about physiologic aging, so a very stark disparity is the difference, the disproportionate impact on Black communities of premature aging. And so when we look at certain health outcomes, such as allostatic load and telomere length, these are markers that have indicated that Blacks are aging more biologically premature compared to whites and also compared to other groups. And in particular, Black women seem to be doing the worst, but Blacks as a group in general seem to be doing worse. And one of the most prominent hypotheses about why we're seeing this higher rate of premature aging among Blacks is because of the experience of stress. Now, all groups experience stress, but what kinds of stressors are unique, chronic stressors are unique to the experience of being Black in this country? And when we think about that question, an obvious answer is racial discrimination, chronic experiences of racial discrimination, which are chronically reported by African Americans. Most African Americans report some experience of racial discrimination in their lifetime, with most reporting multiple experiences. And often African Americans talk about their first experience with racial discrimination happening early in their life course, somewhere around the ages of 7, 8, or 9. And then they talk about repeatedly experiencing racial discrimination throughout their life course. When we think about, again, educational opportunities, when we think about the legacy of racial residential segregation and what that has meant for education quality, for job opportunities, for, you know, all of the things that I've already mentioned, these are all forms of violence against the Black community. And so when we think about violence, in addition to Black men and women getting shot dead on the street when they are unarmed, we're also talking about other forms of structural discrimination, which make it more difficult for Black and brown people in this country to thrive, and in particular, Black people and Indigenous Americans to thrive in this country. And so I'm hoping that these few minutes of remarks can try to kind of help set the tone around structural racism as the fundamental or root cause, which manifests itself in many ways, including what we're seeing now with the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black communities. We're talking about COVID-19 infection rates, but also hospitalization and death rates. In the United States, Blacks experience more than two times higher the COVID-19 death rate compared to other groups. And we see this exact same pattern in all the jurisdictions that have that are collecting and reporting data on race. And then also when we look at not just deaths, but when we look at where testing is happening, we see an inequitable distribution of resources when we look at where we're seeing higher where we're seeing a higher number of cases and where testing is actually occurring. In some places, we actually see that there are a higher number of cases in predominantly low-income communities and communities of color. However, where we're seeing higher testing rates is in predominantly white, higher-income areas. So there's an inequity there. And so I would like to make an argument for, again, thinking about structural racism as the fundamental or root cause in the many, many ways that racism rears its ugly head to manifest in a variety of circumstances that strip Black and brown people.
And the end of that says strip them of their ability to have a healthy quality of life. Apologize that the video cut off. So I'm gonna throw it back to you, Joyce.
Thank you, Dr. Allen, for your extensive academic research and your publications that connect structural racism to adverse health outcomes for Black people. I think we should have a Zoom clap or a thumbs up for our first panel, Dr. Zia Malala and Dr. Amani Allen. Thank you. Okay, now we will transition to panel 2, and that is entitled Moving from Anger to Action. And we have on this particular panel, and I ask that when I call your name, you either wave or raise your hand so that the viewers will know who you are. Our first speaker on this panel is Nathan Mizell. Nathan is the Vice Chair of the Berkeley Police Review Commission and a student at the University of California, Berkeley. Commissioner Mizell will share views today about his work on the Police Commission and discuss the latest developments within the Berkeley Police Department, such as banning tear gas and remarks made recently by the Chief of Police at City Council meetings. And what also sounds to be very exciting about an upcoming November ballot measure seeking to create a fully funded community commission to review police practices. We also have Dr. Toni Jackson, a clinical neuropsychologist. Dr. Jackson is an academic instructor for graduate and undergraduate students. He currently serves as president of the Bay Area Association of Black Psychologists, co-clinical director of Pronamine Center, program director of Therapists in Residency Program, a board member of Love Not Blood campaign, and board member of Alameda County's African American Health and Wellness Committee. Dr. Jackson is an activist and author dedicated to eliminating Black on Black violence. Dr. Jackson's experience growing up in South Central Los Angeles has been a catalyst for his work in neuroscience, substance abuse prevention, counseling, gang intervention, jednaship, music production focusing on positive imagery and lyrics. We also have Layla Aliz. Layla is a law student who works at Pillars of the Community in San Diego, California. Layla is a prison and police abolitionist committed to building health and safe Black-led communities. Layla is deeply invested in Black autonomy through dismantling post-colonialism and its negative physical and mental impacts on Black people. And our final panelist is Rashid Shabazz, multimedia storyteller, urban planning historian, and youth development professional based here in the Bay Area. He coordinates Oakland Voices and is currently earning a master's degree at University of California, Berkeley in city and regional planning. We will now turn it over to our group of panelists.
First, thank you for the introduction. It's very kind, and I'm thankful to be here, and thank Dr. Vicky for the invitation. As said, my name is Nathan Mizell. I am the Vice Chair of the Berkeley Police Review Commission and a rising junior at UC Berkeley. Today I speak as an individual. On Tuesday, we heard essentially the epitome of the larger problem we're trying to solve from the BPD chief, Andy Greenwood, when he was asked what alternatives the police had to tear gas. His answer was, and I quote, "Firearms. We can shoot people." It seems, incredulous that would be his response, especially since BPD had been sued only years ago from his response at a Black Lives Matter protest back in 2015. But unfortunately, it seems that few lessons have been learned since that time. Obviously, we have entered a truly unique time in terms of police relations and police reform and police abolition. Certainly, there has not been a moment like this in my life, and it is a moment that we truly have the opportunity as a community, even at 7% in Berkeley, to create changes that make us safer every day we walk the streets of Berkeley. Certainly, I think one of the most foremost important things in health is a basic comfort and safety in how you operate around the world. And as we all know, that is too often denied to us based on the policing systems we often face. More specifically with Berkeley, one of the long-term fights has been to create a more powerful and a more thorough board that could actually keep police accountable. Currently, we have the Berkeley Police Review Commission, which was originally founded in 1973. This was a big step at the time, and the step came after other police incidents. But as we look on now, almost 50 years later, the board lacks a lot of the basic powers it needs to keep police accountable. The good news is, after years of community work from many members long before me, we now will have a police charter on the ballot in November. Now, I know oftentimes we hear about many ballot measures and how they're going to change everything or how they're incredibly important. I can't promise you that, but what I do know is this ballot measure will significantly impact how one can keep police accountable. And I'll give you the base reasons here. Now, number one is it will double the investigatory window. This is critical because currently the entire window for investigations is 120 days. That is an incredibly small period of time for investigations, and oftentimes those who file reports will file too late and we won't actually be able to investigate. That is being doubled in this new proposal. Number two is it lowers the standard of proof. So currently, when we are attempting to hold an officer accountable for their actions, and we host what's called a board of inquiry. Essentially, there's 3 commissioners, and we will review the evidence of a given case. The burden of proof that we have to reach currently is clear and convincing. That is a very high standard, and it's very hard to prove that standard. That standard will now be lowered to preponderance of evidence, which is 51, 49% it happened or didn't happen. And that will make it a lot easier to prove a lot of these claims where you simply didn't have a full-length YouTube video of what happened, or you didn't have 20 witnesses to an event. And lastly, number 3, the important point is greater access to records. Currently, it is very difficult to access records from BPD. It is a constant and ongoing fight. This charter amendment will make that process significantly easier. Now, before November, there is a lot we can do. First of all is be in the room, whether that's physically in post-COVID times or right now virtually in our current situation. Oftentimes, whether city leaders or commissioners, don't really face a public that is concerned about these issues. We've heard it over and over again in these current 2 weeks. Everyone is now interested, but this interest doesn't tend to last, as we know. Stay interested because these issues will remain important. And when they come up to either the commission or the city council, if no one's there to say anything otherwise than what the city manager recommends or what the chief recommends, that's generally what happens. So please be in the room if you're able to. Number 2, be a voice. Oftentimes, the simple anecdotes of our lives as Black people interacting with police are really important in, changing the narrative of what policing looks like to different people. when there's a single narrative of that policing is great or policing is simply keeping people safe, oftentimes policymakers will fall back on that narrative. We have to bring our narrative to light. And again, right now is a unique moment where everyone is hearing it, but I promise you in months to come, we will have to fight to keep it to the forefront of the council's mind and the commission's mind. Number 3 is recognize the language. Oftentimes, whether it's the PR, whether it's the chief or city leaders, will use, various words and phrases to describe their potential actions, especially in policing. But oftentimes they'll either be empty or they're halfway to the point they're trying to get. They're not really creating tangible change. When you hear those language, hold them accountable. Remember what they said, right? I remember on Tuesday, the mayor of Berkeley said, we are going to work to create a new transformative form of public safety outside of policing. Those were his words then. But those words might change in a couple of months. So hold those people accountable as you hear the language, because oftentimes it will change as time goes on. Now, I'd say lastly, and very importantly, is foster an inner organization community. And that's partly what we're all doing right now. I'm coming together as Black people who work in different walks of life, but recognize that there's a broader issue of systemic racism that affects all of us. It affects policing, it affects healthcare, it affects education, it affects every inch of our society, as you know. And building these networks helps us to fight each of those battles, because I know if I'm called upon the Healthy Black Families to do something, I want to be there. And I hope when I'm called upon you to we really create a transformative public safety system outside of policing, I hope and I think I know that many of you will be there for me and for us to create something that's better than our current system. And I think those main points encompass what we need to do and the path we're going on to first reform policing, and then in the longer go, create a new public safety system outside of the police.
Thank you, Nathan Mizell. When I look at you, I'm reminded that this is why it's important for us to have a seat at the table, and that we have to be, Black people have to be engaged on their local boards and commissions. They have to apply for those seats. We have to run for office. We have to be civilian employees so that our voices and our interests are heard and we have representation. Thank you for making us aware of the new charter amendment, and that we need to keep this out at the forefront and work on this campaign so that we can get local police reform. Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Toni Jackson.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me get up here and start my video. That'll be a little bit better. So thank you to the panelists and for HBF for doing this. Sister Joyce, fantastic job. And welcome to the folks who are out there, family members who are out there. At our training this morning for TNR, one of the Ngangas, young sister, brought up a video, and I think the sister's name is Shakia or something like that, but she was addressing the issue of looting. And I thought that this young sister just handled it brilliantly, because she used the analogy, and maybe you have seen this video, she used the analogy of a Monopoly game. And what if they had played Monopoly with us, but they were not allowed to play until we'd gone around the board 400 times? Better yet, not only did they are they not able to participate, but they would have to help us as we went around the board 400 times. How could they then catch up? There's no way. There's no way to get caught up. From anger to action, very, very challenging topic. When in my research, I looked at 11 different types of anger. So the movement when it comes to dealing with anger can depend on what type of anger we're dealing with, whether it's been with us for a long time as some sort of trait, or state-related anger is dispositional. It's something reactionary from our lived experience. So I'm going to quote from Baba Wade Nobles, just to sort of open this up. Black people are simultaneously dealing with two deadly viruses, COVID-19 and unabated racism in 2020. Everyone knows, though never openly addressed, that the very fabric of American society was woven with savagery, slavery, segregation, defamation, physical brutality, political domination, character and actual assassinations, economic exploitation, cultural denigration, and psychic terrorism. Everywhere Black people are being infected and dying at greater rates than other Americans due to these two deadly viruses. And given the toxic disease of white supremacy, the untreated pathos of fear and hatred of Blackness and denial of Black humanity literally determines life and the lifespan of Black people at birth. Black mental health grounded in culture is essential. Healing that is designed for us and administered by Black people who look like us and understand what it means to be us is desperately needed. So our people are in need of special, extraordinary mental health attention. If we do nothing or do the same old stuff that we've been doing, we may never recover from the psychological damage. So these are extraordinary times. And when I think of these times, I think of the issue of stress, the enormous amount of stress that we as a people are under. It's constant, it's unrelenting, and it has been for a long time. But I want us to understand that stress can be just as debilitating as physical trauma. It can be just as traumatic in the brain as physical trauma. There's a whole field called psychoneuroimmunology, right, that really looks at the role of our immune system and our mental state and the dance between those two. So I want us to think about the seriousness, and there's a lot of research nowadays out on the discussion. We used to call it mind-body oneness, right? Moving away from Descartism and duality. But to think about the gut-brain axis, the gut-brain axis. The idea that inflammation in the gut triggers neuroinflammation, inflammation in the brain. And understand that that inflammation can lead inevitably to a more rapid neurodegeneration or to neurodegenerative diseases and disorders. So when we're working with people, we want to think about what they're going through at this point and what that's going to look like 30 years down the road from them. It's very, very important to understand that. There's these small cells in the brain called microglia, right? And what's important, without getting into the details of microglia, is that when they are run away, right, they are part of the brain's immune system, And when they are run away, they're very difficult to stop. The brain can be inflamed in a way that actually changes genetic expression. So the spillover is into issues of mood and cognitive changes, all those different things. So it's very important for us to engage in stress strategies. And I'll leave you with this. As we're in home and we're sheltering in place, just remember the 5 R's, right? To remember who we are and whose we are, to remind us that white supremacy is still the underbelly of American society, to reframe shelter in place in a way that allows us to be more creative, to reward good speech, thought, and behavior in our families, and to, by all means, avoid clashes with our teenagers, with our family members, seek peace, create peace within the household. And that's the short. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. I did see the Monopoly video and I got angry because I want to own Broadway and Park Place. And I'm thinking, how can I ever get that, right? How can I achieve that type of land ownership, right? So anyhow, this is a long journey, recognizing that. So I want to thank you for reminding us to take care of ourselves, and that we should push for greater mental health services by us and for us, and to try to keep our anger and our inflammation in check and calm so that we remain healthy. So thank you for those words. And now we will switch to Layla Elise, our law student. Thank you.
You're muted, sis.
Unmuting also helps. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. It reminds me that, thank you, Elder, that self-care is so important when we're fighting colonialization every single day that we're in this country. And as I look at all of the different things that are going on now because of police brutality, and one of the biggest things we're hearing is community policing and training the police. And as a historian, I realize that these things have already been done. We've done community policing in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And what it ended up doing is a more repressive, oppressive system to the community members, the people actually in the community, because that coffee with the cop, that whole thing, are people that are normally the landlords and the business owners, and not the community members themselves who are being harassed and brutalized by the police. The same thing with training. Police training has been on the table for decades, and every time that we end up training the police, they become more militarized. We have more surveillance in our communities. In San Diego, we're also fighting for an independent police commission with subpoena power, investigative power. And I am for certain aspects of reform, but it has to have an abolitionist mind frame, and it has to be intentional. And I say that because I do not believe that this country will ever, based on the way it was built, the fabric and the foundation, deal with Africans in a just manner. We must do that for ourselves. This country, the Supreme Court, the highest court of this country, has upheld slavery, Jim Crow, gang laws, and an assortment of other things that have made Black and brown people and non-white immigrants always second-class citizens. We look at the police, and the reason they were created and the reason they still exist is to maintain social order through force and protect white people's property and money. And when we look at these things, we see why the laws that are oppressive, that are destroying our communities, why they exist. So how do we redefine that now, and how do we go to action? How do we envision and then implement a justice system without the state? And that is very important. When we look at harm and we look at what's going on in our community, how do we build within that in order for the people in our community from a transformative, restorative, and communal aspect deal with that harm? Take away the retribution and punishment. Can you hear me? And deal with that harm. So As we do this, we look at mutual aid. We look at mental health and training people in our community on mental health 911. We look at taking care of each other. We look at restorative circles. We look at other countries, we are colonized in America. And that's the first matter of acceptance that I had to come to deal with. I am a colonized people in a country that is hostile towards me. And when I look at the different models that we have as we go into action, two of them which are modern and they're done now. One is in Nigeria, and I believe it's the Afikpo people, and the other is in Mexico, and those are the Zapatista. And how they have created a just system without the state, even when the colonial state has the different structures of justice, beginning with the police, who are the ones who enact social control through force. How do we make a reality around that? And the different ways we do that through rites of passage, through true quality mentoring, which the elder was talking about before we came on. And I used to develop mentoring programs within San Diego and train people nationally on mentoring programs. We cannot base, and I'm preaching to the choir here, our justice system, our mentoring, our education, and our healthcare based on Anglo-Saxon values. And that's what's being asked of us every day within this country. And that's one of the primary results of why we don't see things the same. Because the way that we look at the world is different. And a long time ago, thank goodness, our ancestors have said we are not going to assimilate. We are going to remain Africans in this country that we were brought to, that we did not choose to come to. We're going to stay here because we built this country. You owe us money because we did so for free, and we played your Monopoly game and helped you for 400 years, and then another 100 years as you cheated us out of everything else as we built them. But at this point, we want autonomous communities without police, without healthcare workers who are telling our people how to take care of our bodies. We want African healthcare workers who understand what we need. We want mental health workers who understand they're culturally appropriate and they come into our communities and understand the fabric of our communities and the ability to do the work in our communities. And our goal is, and I'm so proud of Seattle, is to make it where police are not welcome. We talk about defunding the police. I believe that's going to start on a community building aspect. And when we say that, is our community so locked in and working together and seeking justice without any intervention of the state whatsoever, and demanding the police department and any other social control mechanisms of any sort not come into our communities. And I believe we can do that. I am a supporter of Free the Land and the Africans in certain southern states going to Africans. And that is because of the basis and the foundation of me and my understanding of Black people being able to do for self. So after the anger, and sometimes I look at it with the anger, and going into action is the creation of, and policy does help, but the biggest impact is going to be community building on the ground, in the dirt, with the people. And that's how we're going to be able to take back control of ourselves and resist colonialization as it exists for us now. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Layla. You're going to make an excellent attorney. Thank you for providing the historical context, the suggestions for a new model, and reminding us that we're in a fight for autonomy, self-determination, reparations, and land. So our next speaker is Rashid Shabazz.
All right, assalamu alaikum. Peace, family. My name is Rashid Shabazz, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be here today. Over the last few years, I've been studying about the history of the city of Berkeley, and would like to share in my few minutes a little bit about some of that history, and particularly focusing on housing and place, because housing, where we live, has such an impact on our health, how social control mechanisms like police function, and more. And just to build on what the brother Nathan spoke to earlier, as a journalist in my capacity, I was out there at those 2014 Berkeley protests, and I was batoned by a Black police officer who had actually been fired from Berkeley PD for stealing evidence about 8 years earlier. But somehow he was out there Baton and me and others. And we sued the Berkeley Police Department, and they ain't changed. So I digress. I really want to focus on this history because for many people, they don't know it and understand how it impacts what we see today. South Berkeley, really Southwest Berkeley, is primarily or historically housed Black folks in Alameda. Berkeley, South Berkeley in particular, became sort of the epicenter for the Black middle class in the Bay Area, at least the East Bay. You know, you had a little money, or you moved to the West Coast, you moved to West Oakland, you get a little money, then you move to South Berkeley. And eventually, it was actually called Negro Piedmont by one real estate appraiser who was a part of the constructing the redlining maps. And for those who are familiar with that history, that's what's behind me. So the Black population was fairly small up until World War II. It was just up to 4% in 1940, but then that grew to 11%, and then later 19%, and then it peaked at about a quarter of the population in 1970. Since that time, the population has continued to decrease. Anecdotally, there's a lot of different factors, and I say anecdotally because a lot of different people have a lot of different theories. Certainly, part of it is gentrification. There are some people who believe it's because younger generations were unable or to maintain the property of others, or decided to get quick cash. And so there's a lot of reasons, but I think a lot of it is very anecdotal and no one's really done research on it. I want to go back and just highlight three main things that have structured where people live in the city of Berkeley. And I'm going to talk about restrictive covenants, I'm going to talk about zoning, and then finally redlining, which I'll probably speak about the most. And so Berkeley began to get more segregated and more structurally segregated in the early 1900s. The developers of small subdivisions or large subdivisions, they used racially restrictive covenants. And these were things that were private contracts that were written into the deeds that excluded certain groups of people. And it primarily targeted Black people as well as Asians. Later, officials used zoning ordinances, districting and zoning ordinance to codify that segregation. And so that made the Southwest and West areas of Berkeley, or Ocean View, or where I'm from, we used to call it the waterfront, but that made those areas industrial districts and zones. And it preserved East and North Berkeley for white people, and particularly white single-family homeowners. Whereas in South Berkeley, for the most part, you'll find more multi-family homes. And so that led to the area developing as a multi-ethnic, working class, multiracial community. And it had a lot of different white ethnic groups, Japanese, and largely African Americans. So the private structure of restrictive covenants then lended itself to the public enforcement of zoning. And again, while restrictive covenants, they were these private contracts, they were legally enforceable by the courts. Whereas with the zoning, that's the city saying, this is what belongs where. And it was predicated upon racial exclusion. This was later affirmed by the federal government with the creation of the Homeowners Loan Corporation's maps, these residential security maps. And so you can see this in the background here. You can look this up online. You'll see that South Berkeley was designated red. And so these maps created these four grades. A and B were green and blue. Yellow was C, and that's a more risky area. And then D was the worst grade, and it was colored red. And so that's why people use the phrase redlining. So you can see from this map, and again, I encourage people to look at sites like Mapping Inequality, and you can actually read the descriptions for different areas. Places like D4 or South Berkeley were rated red, even though the Black people in that area had relative wealth. And so areas that were racially homogenous, or really all white, those were the areas that got higher rankings, which meant it was less risky. They were prime for investment, whereas the areas that were red were not. And so people were unable to get loans to redevelop their properties or to purchase or repair their properties. And so this had a long-term influence. And so you see there with the real estate appraisal, these were privately done by real estate agents or appraisers. And then this was later codified by the federal government. And this is how resources were distributed. And so this all contributed to the geography of Berkeley. And so I just want to wrap up by saying this past fall, as part of one of my city planning classes, I looked at who was able to get loans in the city of Berkeley, and particularly South Berkeley, by race, by income. And less than half of Black people that applied for loans in South Berkeley were able to get loans. And so whether it's the explicit redlining, the pattern of Black dispossession has continued to this day. There have been some calls in the last few years about what people are calling the right of return. And so the opportunity for displaced Black folks from South Berkeley or in Berkeley to be able to come home, to be able to have a place that they call home. And so I end my remarks there.
Thank you very much, Rashid, for pointing out, how the use of neutral laws and ordinances and color coding, how those types of things discriminate against Black people and sort of protect, the communities of white people. And it is unfortunate that Berkeley has been gentrified, but we are certainly hoping that Black people will return to their city. So we have just concluded our panel, and I think we should all give a hand clap, a thumbs up to our panel 2. And we will move now and transition to our third panel. Thank you. The third panel is entitled Safe Strategies for Our Youth During Change. On this panel, we have Kaamika Goodwin, who is a community advocate with Healthy Black Families. For 20 years, she has advocated for healthy Black communities in Oakland and Berkeley through her work as a preschool and family daycare teacher. By creating a healthy environment, Kaamika makes it possible for parents to become strong advocates within their own homes and communities. Currently, she works at Healthy Black Families as program coordinator for Sisters Together Empowering Peers, the STEP program. This work has given her an opportunity to make a difference from a policy lens. We also have Ramel, Lamar L., and Brandon Lucky, and they will share the mic. They are members of the local African community and professional educators. Both are advocates in their work. They developed and implemented a community-based education program to meet the needs of all school-age children in the local African community, regardless of school enrollment. And then our final panelist is Zoe Polk. She is the executive director of the East Bay Community Law Center, one of the Bay Area's largest and most effective legal service providers and educational clinics. As executive director, she leads clinic efforts to provide client-centered and holistic advocacy services with the goals of dismantling structural racism and building healthy, resilient communities. We're proud of Zoe because she recently assumed the helm of the East Bay Community Law Center as executive director in January 2020, becoming the 4th executive director in the organization's 32-year history. So welcome to our panel 3, and we'll turn it over to Kaamika.
All right. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. So I wanted to talk to you guys today just about safe strategies for our youth to promote self-advocacy. As our moderator said, I am born and raised a Berkeley chick for my whole life, and my mom has been running her daycare for about 30 years. So that's always been my passion, talking with our babies and working with them and being part of the preschool in North Oakland. That also allowed me more opportunities to dig in and be a self-advocate. And then when I took on the position at Healthy Black Families, it was yet another avenue to help the community. So I wanted to just talk about what we can do when we're at home with our babies, homeschooling them as we're doing our shelter in place. I just want us to help them to understand that the main thing they can do is use their voices. When the child comes into our doors at preschool or the daycare, that is one main thing I try to instill in them at the beginning, that use your voice, and that's the main and most important thing you have. If someone's doing something that you don't like, speak up, let them know. And so this is a great opportunity for them to be able to point out injustice in the community, at their school, at their summer camps, since summer camps are starting to open back up. And it'll be interesting just to see how things move, but I just really want our children to know that their voice is important and they have one. And what us teaching them to use their voice, it promotes a few things. It promotes language development because they're learning to use their words. It promotes social development because they're getting to speak to their peers and other people in the community. And it also introduces them to public speaking, which is always a great tool to have. And they're realizing with the public speaking piece that they have a right to their opinion. They also realize that they have a voice that matters. Another way we can do a safe strategy with our little ones is to just focus on arts and crafts. I saw 2 images online. It was one little baby, maybe about 7 months. He had a little sign. He was on his dad's shoulder. He was protesting, and it was nothing but scribbles. It was like a scribble in each corner. But just for him to just have that creativity to make a sign and get out there, that was amazing to me. And then there was another picture of one guy on a block by himself with his Black Lives Matter picture as well. So allowing our children to be able to create posters, and we don't have to wait for the next big protest or march. We can march around our neighborhood. We can march up the block, you know, or just making a poster and placing them inside the house somewhere, placing them outside the house. That allows them a way to get what's in out. I know that unfortunately we don't want them to have to deal with this at a young age, but it's there, and they're very involved, and they're very ignited about it. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old grandchild, and they're, you know, trying to do some of these things I'm talking to you about. They're very involved and very curious as to how their world is going to play out in the next few months. And so drawing pictures and dictating, letting them dictate to us what the picture is about, making collages, all different ways. This is great opportunities for us to strengthen and teach our babies how to be self-advocates, even though we're in crucial times. Another thing we can do is just have family talks, to sit down and talk, as well as having one-on-one chats with our children. And doing this, we're able to just have a dedicated time to discuss what's going on in the world. It's uncomfortable, it's sad, it's hurtful, it's triggering, but doing this, it allows them to get it off their chest and have a safe space to do so. And also they're able to see that the family is united, and they're also able to just kind of get ideas from their siblings and their family members on how to move and pivot during these times. It's also having one-on-one chats are really, really key, because sometimes they don't want to talk around big sister or uncle, or, you know, they want to just be able to have that one-on-one time to just kind of release and get things off their chest. And another thing that's really key that I promote all the time in my programs in the school is reading together with them. There's a lot of books out there. I was just looking online, trying to find books for my groups I host, and there's a lot of books, and we can use this as an opportunity in different ways to teach them to read, to teach them about books, but also to talk about these difficult things that we don't really want to talk about, but we need to. And then last but not least, I know some people don't encourage it, but just having an educational movie or a short film or a TV series that kind of focuses and open up the door for you to talk about the COVID-19s and the racism, and just, you know, help them to understand, because even though they're young, they know what's going on and it's affecting them more than we think. And I really, really want us to not forget that, and not just leave them in the kind of in the wings, but just really respect that they're smarter than we think. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaamika, for your important work with these children, teaching them how to speak up, letting them know that their voices matter. All of those things build self-esteem. And we want all of our children to know that, yes, they are somebody. So our next speaker is Ramel, Lamar L., and Brandon Lucky. And they will share the mic.
Peace and blessings, everybody. Can everybody hear?
For giving us the opportunity. I'm wow, this thing is on mute still.
We hear you now.
Oh, sorry, good. So yeah, I'm not going to really speak too much because we don't have a lot of time, and I would like to yield a majority of my time to Brandon, just to introduce myself. My name is Ramel. I live in the community. I've been teaching math at Berkeley Technology Academy since about 2007. I come out of Los Angeles. You know, all of that kind of don't matter. The thing that really matters is you know, us seizing the moment in time right now, in light of this whole COVID drama and the continual, you know, anti-Black racism that we facing across the world. And you know, I'm just very lucky and honored to be able to work with Brother Brandon and to you know, to continue our work. I would like to pass the mic on to B if it's cool. And the only thing that I would want to share as a visual is the document that's been guiding my work since I came up here from Los Angeles. But with that, I yield the floor.
All right, what's going on, everybody? So just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Brandon Lucky. I work for the Berkeley Unified School District, and recently we opened up a business, Playground Kings, and that's really what I want to talk to you guys about today. Just want to say also, like, it's a great pleasure to be a part of what you guys are doing, and yeah, I'm gonna go to our presentation. All right, so Playground Kings is a community-based business, primarily focused on education and character building. We offer services like nutrition, self-care, community awareness, and social injustice. We just started last year. It was our first year. We had summer camps, went really well. We got a lot of positive feedback. So we pretty much prime ourselves on being fun and engaging for the kids. We have a fun and engaging approach. We have a village style. It's all outdoors. We offer a lot of community involvement. We work with spiral gardens for our gardening to get kids engaged in gardening activities. We also did a lot of yoga, sports and games. A lot of activism also was our approach to engaging the kids. We did trash pickups every morning. We would go around the park and pick up bottle caps and stuff like that, just to get the kids acclimated with community awareness. We also had a couple of speakers from the Berkeley Police Department to pretty much teach some of the kids the basis of the justice system and kind of like how to abide by certain rules and codes of ethics, just to kind of like work on their character building skills. We offer a tutoring service through these graphic novels that me and the other co-founder worked on. We use that, and we also have workbooks that we've been working on, just all our own products that we produce. We also do workshops, creative writing workshops. We work with the kids on basically how to create their own stories, and we do digital art workshops as well. So a lot of different academic-based activities to pretty much keep the kids engaged and just build a healthier relationship with school. So I'm gonna go on to the next one. We built a lot of healthy relationships with parents and healthy relationships with students as well. We've established a presence as educational aides, and pretty much just begin to develop ourselves as a company and as just offering services to our community. Community engagement is really important, and also we pride ourselves on being a zero waste camp. We also work with Heirs to the Ocean, another community-based, well, not community, but another organization focused on community activism. We'll go to this next slide. This all community and Black-owned business. We pretty much are both natives of Berkeley. Me and Greg Williams, the other co-founder, and just working with the youth at Oxford Elementary School. We've really specialized in academic and emotional growth and support for the kids that we work with. It's been a big mission of Playground Kings to, really root ourselves in Berkeley and, really focus on branching out and taking us to other communities across the Bay Area first, of course. And, we've had a lot of great success branching out and just working with healthy Black families is definitely a key part in what we're about. We share a lot of the same goals and values, and we have a strong, passionate approach to pretty much just reshaping and redesigning the community and building a healthy environment. I apologize for being nervous to you guys as well. That pretty much wraps up with what I have to say. Again, thank you guys for providing the opportunity to us.
Wow, thank you so much. We are I'm overwhelmed. I had no idea about your program, but it's refreshing to see young Black men step up as leaders in our community. So we are definitely looking forward to partnering with Playground Kings. Thank you so much. We now would like to give a hand clap and a thumbs up to our panel 3. And as we wrap up panel 3, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So it is now 4:12. Please come back at 4:17. Thank you.